Hi, I'm Karen from the Divorce Workshop. You're listening to Life Changes channel.
I really want to hear what you think. What's your feedback? I have a quick survey available that only takes a couple minutes. And as my way of saying thank you, I'm going to enter your name in a draw, multiple draws for multiple gift cards, just for letting me know your feedback about the magazine, the podcast, the events, and everything that I'm offering. The link is in our show notes. Life comes with many changes. Some are expected, some are unexpected, some positive, some challenging. But you don't have to navigate them alone. There are people who care and want to help. You're in the right place because I'm here to connect you with them. What is your next step? Making choices that involve change can be difficult. Where can you find the resources who have answers for your questions? Our team of experts and professionals can help you make informed decisions with less stress to help you manage these changes in your life easier. You'll also meet people just like you who share their stories to encourage you not to give up. Hi, I'm Dina Court, an author, blogger, publisher, and empowerment coach. Thank you for joining me today on the Life Changes channel podcast, where we'll cover topics around life changes that you might be facing in your career and education, health, finances, relationships, parenting, aging, real estate, lifestyle, loss, and personal growth. This show started out as a Divorce Magazine Canada podcast, but so much of the content could also apply even if you aren't dealing with a divorce or separation. So now it's Life Changes channel. There will still be lots of information to support you or someone you care about who is dealing with divorce or separation. I encourage you to go back and meet all the incredible guests in the earlier episodes. There is so much gold there. And hey, did you know we have a YouTube channel, a new Life Changes channel, and free magazines with articles from our team available across much of Alberta, as well as on our website, lifechangesmag.com. We also hold online divorce resource groups that are free to attend, and everyone is welcome. Check out the links in the show notes and be sure to join us. We love bringing experts to you. Please refer to our terms of service available on our website, lifechangesmag.com, and stay tuned at the end for the legal language. Ready? Here we go. When you have experienced divorce or separation, or you're going through it, or even if it's years behind you, or some other type of major life change, loss and grief are very hard to deal with. We don't even realize sometimes that what has us feeling off is related to grief. And my special guest today, Karen Omand, is a grief counselor and a divorce coach. And she has some really interesting information for us to help us understand grief and how to deal with it. Let's meet her now. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
This is really fun. I think you are the first couple that I've interviewed, and we've had Kirk on the show, and now we are honored to have you because you guys are an amazing team with the divorce workshop that you're working on, the workbook that's coming together, but you also bring a unique quality to this team that we want to dive into more today. So welcome to the show, Karen. Please tell us more about yourself and your why, the work you're doing.
So, pleasure to be here. I'm a thanatologist trained. So, thanatology is the study of grief, bereavement, and loss. And about 3 years ago, going through my own divorce, I noticed that a lot of people, excluding myself, didn't really know what was going on emotionally, but also how to navigate divorce. And even though I was leaving my marriage, I wondered why I was crying in the woods. And I had thought, this is silly. I'm wanting to leave this marriage, but I was going through a lot of grief of my own. And I started kind of thinking that there needed to be more help for people that are, we know divorce is legal, we know it's financial, we know there's emotions, but there's a real grief component here that sometimes gets missed. And I think that was one of the reasons of why we decided to do the workbook and the workshop, and is to help people understand every type of aspect of divorce, but my specialty is also the grief aspect. And one of my professors at University of Western said, divorce for some people can be just as hard or harder than a death loss. Now, I say that carefully, because as a thanatologist, death is the hardest loss. But there are people that go through a divorce, and it can be really, really, really challenging and difficult. And what I also found through the work of doing a lot of counseling over the years, as well as some divorce counseling too, is that the symptoms that people feel when they're a loss of a spouse can be almost the same type of symptoms that they feel in grief from a divorce.
Oh.
So that is the why is from as I really want to help people as a thanatologist, grief counselor, educator. That's where that comes from. And then having the workbook has been another, to us, it's like a baby. Like we've been working on it for 2.5 years. And it's really helping people just navigate this unknown world that unless you've been through a divorce, you don't really have any idea. So that's kind of the reason why we started it. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, but I want to unpack it and dig in deeper too.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I love so much about what you're creating around grief with this as well is compassion for ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and for others. So when we are experiencing that, like you're going, wait a minute, why am I so sad? Why am I grieving over something that I actually know needed to happen? I'm actively leaving, and yet it's hitting you so hard. So I think for people to gain some understanding and just have that compassion for themselves, to offer that time and space to heal, as well as when you're supporting someone that is going through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to practice. A lot of the work in thanatology is the self-compassion. And the more compassion we can have on ourselves, self-compassion, the better we will heal. Now, in grief world, we don't have stages, and we don't have closure. And we can kind of put that similarly with a divorce as well. Like there is closure, as in the divorce papers are final. But there's not really a closure, as in you have to integrate that grief, right? Like that person you had for 10, 15, 20 years, it's a loss. None of us, as we all know, none of us get married to get divorced. That's not why we get married. So there's a lot to grief than just, sadness, right? We talk a lot in Thanatology about secondary losses, and those are other things. So if you think of yourself as you as a circle, the main part is a divorce, but all these other losses come into play with people, right? So it's not just the chattels, like the house. There's also your identity, like you were a miss or a mister, and now all of a sudden, who are you again? And that's another thing that you have to figure out who you are. And one of the things with grief and loss is you have to try to make meaning again. And it's the same thing when you are a widow or widower. And I've worked with hundreds of those. The biggest challenge is trying to find meaning, right? So you have to accept the reality of the loss, but you also have to somehow navigate again and rebuild your life. And that's really close to what a divorce is like. Like your foundation is cracked, it's changed, and now you have to figure out who you are and rebuild a life again. And they're different, right? But there's some similarities that really cross over. And I'm not sure people are quite aware of that. You would know, you would maybe know better if more people know about that. But from my understanding, what I've been coaching and counseling, it's not really as well known. Divorce is very subjectively supported, if you know what I mean. So you may go to a family event, and your aunt may say, oh, you should have left him years ago, right? And then you can go into another room and they say, well, why would you ever get divorced, right? So, right. And so that's subjective, where when you have a widow or a widower, which I've worked with, they they just get support, right? So a lot of times divorce grief can be disenfranchised, where it's not supported as well as it should be. That's a big component of grief. The more support you have, the better.
I agree, Karen. When you say that a lot of people don't realize that that's going to be part of the process,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, when it comes up and they hit that wall, they are already in a place where they're probably so exhausted and just want this to be over with, and then all of a sudden it's this very deep-seated sadness and the mourning, and they're like, what is going on? I'm just happy to be away from this. I needed to get out of it, but why is it bothering me so much?
Mhm.
And if they understood, and I love that you're bringing more awareness to that, if they can understand that that is going to be part of it, then not only the self-compassion, but they won't push themselves so hard to just move through this.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
part of the healing and the letting go and the understanding that you are losing something that at one time meant a lot to you. And it's changed now, but there's still so much else besides just the loss of that relationship. Like you say, your
Mhm.
identity has changed, your
Mhm.
your your basis, not even to mention, like you say, the finances, the home, where you're living. You're gonna, if there's children, you may be seeing less of them now. They're being shared to different locations, or you may have lost some level of closeness to some of your children in the morning. There's just, not to mention the outlaws that are now ex-laws, and any relationships you've had outside of that partner relationship. So when you stop and think about it, it's so huge.
Mhm. And I don't think many people really understand that, when they're going through, they make that decision. We know research-wise that many people detach way before, and
Mhm.
you decide that. It's a very unique decision. Like everyone can decide what is their, when are they done. But I don't think they know that, wow, like this is going to happen. This is going to happen. This is like the losses are, you know, there's a lot. And the symptoms are another thing I want to touch down briefly on today, is that not many people are well aware of the grief symptoms. I have a whole thing in the workbook where it's like, why am my stomach upset? It's digestive issues, right? Why am I kind of feel like I'm foggy? And that's grief. When you lose somebody, whether you wanted it or not, you're in detachment distress, right? So your body and your mind and your physiological and your physical are all grieving, and you're in detachment distress, and that's grief. And so a lot of people, they don't know what's going on with them. They're like, why is it one day I'm like relief, and the next day you're crying because you're missing this aspect of this terrible partner that was, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's such a weird time, and it's a roller coaster ride, and a lot of people don't really understand that, and so they kind of get like, what is going on?
Well, and even if you've thought a lot through of what you're letting go of, what's changing, the emotions then hit you, or those symptoms hit you, and it's a mystery. Why can't I just move on? I know it's going to be so much better, and there's going to be this freedom, and I can discover who I am. And yes, that's there waiting for you on the other side of some of these emotions.
Mm-hmm.
How
A
do
lot
you
of
work?
time, oh sorry, a lot of time in the grief world, we one of my professors did, I just want to demonstrate, like, so our mentally we know, right, and even emotionally we know, right, like, but but getting through it is a long distance between mentally knowing it and your emotional knowing. So we mentally say, I'm done, I'm so done, it's over, or you were left, and that's a shock and everything. But for these two to connect emotionally and mentally, it takes time, right? So you may know it's the right choice for you, but your heart and your emotion has to work through all that. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
It does. And
yeah.
Karen, how do you work and walk patients through this? How do you work with them too?
So in grief counseling, it is more about companioning with them. So I don't have, there's no, like, I have tools, but there's no like, okay, this week we work on this week we work on this, because that's not grief. Grief doesn't work that way. So I find that a lot of people will come when they're in acute divorce time and they're really struggling with, then I'll see them. But then over time, it's like, okay, I have to do check-in with Karen. But it could be also 2 months, 3 months, 1 month, right? Because what we want with grief and what I work with people is to integrate it, right? So it's never, it's never going to fully go away ever. Like you'll always, you'll be okay that the marriage is over, but you're going to always, if you have children, you'll see them at a graduation or you'll see them at their wedding. And even though it's the right decision for you, or maybe it was the right decision for both you, or maybe it was the right decision for him, there can be for some people a pang of a feeling of grief that comes up even over the years. I've seen that with many, right? Where it's not like it's grief where it's, oh, I want them back. It's just, a little bit of oh, okay, it just didn't work, right? And that's sad.
And disappointment, right?
Yeah, and the feeling like I remember when I was here I am studying thanatology. I knew I was grieving. I came from a divorced family, and I remember calling my older sister up and I said to her, "Are you going to be embarrassed that I'm getting a divorce?" And I thought, and as soon as it came out of my mouth, I said, "Why am I saying that?" Like she knew I struggled in this marriage, right? So, but still today, right? Like I still felt stigma associated with it all. And I knew better. I knew this was the right choice for me and my children, but I still felt that sense of, as you say, disappointment. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like I failed, right? And I know it's a common thing with people that have gone through divorce, that there's a lot of self-stigma, we call it in grief world, that people look at you differently, but you actually feel a little bit like, I feel like I did wrong or I didn't make it work and I tried. So in grief counseling, there are some tools I use. There's a lot of educating, a lot of supporting, a lot of people understanding, right? Like I will send them stuff about how your brain grieves, right? Because people don't understand that. And there's a lot of there's a lot of things with grief that I can work on. It's just that it's more of where you are rather than where I want you to be, right? Because it's a process, and it's a tough process for some.
And it's not linear, like you said. It's all over the place, and you might feel like you go backwards and forwards. Now, something that I do want to touch on a bit, because it is so important to the work that I do, is for people who are in abusive situations and how that complicates their grieving. Now, with my own personal experience, I've lost two brothers, 9 years apart. They were both young adults. And I probably realized I hadn't fully grieved, just push that down, but and keep going. I had young family, and I was in an abusive marriage. And it was years later that there was a trigger, some photos that I came across from one of the accident scenes. And it literally was a kick in the stomach. Literally, I couldn't breathe. I came up the stairs from where I was going through with all these old photos that needed sorting, and I was doubled over and gasping for breath. And that was the first time I sought some mental health assistant, like went to a psychologist. And when she started exploring, very quickly uncovered the reason that I'd never processed this grief was the survival mode that I was living in.
Of course.
And
that then complicates the healing process of grief that you're needing to deal with, because you're in survival mode, you're hypervigilant, you have more important things
Yep.
to consider.
And you can delay grief for a little while. Okay. Dr. Shear is a famous grief psychiatrist in New York, and I did her training, and you can delay it for a little while as you had to, but grief will come. It'll come when it wants to. You can be sick, like you can get really sick. It'll come out the way it did with you. Like you weren't able to grieve with your, like have a safe spot to grieve. And it sounds like what happened with your brothers was the one was accidental death or both, right? So that alone, the circumstances of that, you needed support anyways. You probably could have been in trauma therapy as well as combination of grief therapy, right? Because it is sudden losses like that. Plus they were young, and we call that off time. And those are tragic, right? So I'm very glad you finally got some help, but you can delay it, but grief comes out. And that's what probably happened to you, is like you pushed it down for so long because you had to. But I'm not surprised when you told me your story that it came out, and it came out strong, because there's a lot of pain that you were holding in there. A lot.
And that's where people can find that they will have come up years after divorce, when they haven't had the time or taken the time, allowed themselves the space and self-compassion to heal and process through that. And it might be who knows what the trigger might be.
Yeah, I find a lot gets stuck. I've been a couple of years ago during COVID, I was doing we have Chartwell. Do you have Chartwell there, with these senior homes? And I was doing educational. And one of the ladies was from a divorce, and she was divorced for a long time. She was so angry. She had kept it and wasn't able, as I would like to see people who divorce or in grief loss, to make meaning again. So two of the things that I look for in divorce as well as death loss is the acceptance of the loss, the death or the loss, the divorce, but also how to make meaning in life again. And that has to be with divorce as well. You have to figure out how to make meaning again. And I can't do that for you. No one really can. I can guide, and that's some of the work I do, but they have to kind of navigate, figure out, am I going to go back to school? Am I going to join a meeting group? Am I going to date again? Am I going to write a book? You know what I mean? Like try to find meaning. Like it's the same type of component we have with when I deal with death loss as I do with divorce, because you have to make meaning of this. And also you've heard many times, right? It's just a chapter, and it's a huge chapter, but it needs to be dealt with. Like you need to lean. Early on in my Thanatology degree, they always talked about leaning in, right? And that's where, you couldn't feel safe enough to lean in, to get that support from your partner who was abusive, right? But you need to learn, you need to have that, lean into that. And it's scary when you're on your own divorcing, and it can be a really tough divorce. You have to find safe people to lean into, because you don't lean into your children. That's not their job, right? And so you have to, that's a lot of time in what I do too, is we try to figure out where you can get the right support systems, because that's essential in divorce. And there's not as much out there as I would like.
Well, I like that you and Kirk are developing support to help people navigate through this. And the format of the workbook is very well thought out. Can you tell us more about how you planned this?
So actually, it started 2.5 years ago. I thought 10 units. And then the more I kept thinking about it, I went, that's a lot. Like, because I had grief, I had anger, I had, and I went, this is too much. I mean, people don't have that much time, right? So the book is formulated as an insight. So as I said to you before, like not many people unless you've been through divorce, really have much insight on what it actually is to get through a divorce. So that's the first unit. And then the second unit is legal information, which it's just information, right? You need to go to a mediator or to a lawyer, but this is kind of helping you figure out, you should probably interview 3 or 4 lawyers. You should probably consult with mediators, right? You don't, and I didn't know that. Like, so that's an important unit. Well, they're all important units. And then the emotional, right? Like, that's a real one to my heart, because that's what I deal with a lot, right? We know that divorce is extremely emotional, and that's what can cause us trouble. So we try to, with our exercises and some of the graphics that we've done, we try to get it to be for people to understand, like, okay, so I probably shouldn't react. I need to learn to respond. And then the financial, it's just learning information, right? Read this, you need to see a financial advisor, you need to see an accountant, but read this, get a general basics of understanding. You need a budget. You need to learn what's going to be happening, right? And then the co-parenting, that's obviously another very important part of divorce, right? You have to learn to be a team. It's a new team. It's a new business. It's called co-parenting. And I made mistakes, and Kirk would admit he made mistakes, and we're all going to make mistakes. But if we can at least, go through this unit and go, okay, well, at least I'll try not to do this one. I'll not do that again. And again, practicing self-compassion, because we're all flawed and we're all going to make mistakes. But this is just to help you navigate through this whole process. And then recovery, which is a wonderful chapter, because we all have to have hope, right? Like, that we will get through this. You did, I did, many people do. And so it's tools. Like, we're just working last night on identity, because, as I said to you, identity after divorce, it can be tough, right? Who are you again? You have to rediscover yourself, and who are you now, and who do you want to be? So we really are, I'm really passionate about this book, because I think it can help many. And that's why we've invested so much time, I think.
Well, and I like it that it's a workbook to each person can learn from it, but it's also set up in such a way that they can work through it. They can put their own process down on the paper through each section, wherever. They don't have to do it sequentially. They can work, right now, today, I'm struggling with finding a purpose, a new identity. I'd like to understand the legal. Let's just pop back there. What's something I need to know? So I really like that it's personalized for people. They can make this their own.
Yeah, and it's also very easy on the eyes. Like, it's not checklists. It's very, like, easy to navigate. Like, it's as you flip open, you're like, okay, I can, you know what I mean? Like, it's just easy. It's not a hard book. It's not we call them workouts, but the exercises are not hard, because I knew, and I said to Kirk, I said, when you're going through a divorce, you're cognitively not, always so strong. You're exhausted, you're overwhelmed, and you don't have time to do what you did at college or university, right? So we didn't make them too complex, but we made them where it's self-reflective, right? You do this simple test, you go, oh, okay, so I got to be careful when I do this with my children, right? Like, maybe I shouldn't do that, right? Or, my identity, or, oh boy, I was a bit explosive today with my ex. I gotta, the bombs. So we have little bombs in the workbook where it's like little bomb, short fuse, big, so
Yep.
just so you get in your head, right? Going, okay, right. And you can cut them out and you can put them on the fridge, right? And go, okay, just remember. So, and I do, like you said, I do like that they can, that they can just, there's the first little book. We're redoing it, but you can kind of, just flip wherever you want for that, and again, it's a very good foundational book. Most of you have to go to special people, right? But this is a good way to start navigating and educating and working through. And as you said, it's your own. Like, it's not my story. It's not your story, like Dina's story. It's their story. And they get to figure out, because every divorce is unique. It's all different.
Thank you for creating that. I'm really excited for when this is going to be available for people, and I'll update the show notes with that link once it is available. But in the meantime, I'll have all your contact information in the show notes so people can reach out and learn more about what you and Kirk are developing, but also around the grief work that you do and how you offer that to people. So really fascinating stuff, Karen. And obviously, like I mentioned, when Kirk was on the show, we'll be having you guys back again because there is so much value in what you're offering and what you've identified that can support people, that, you know, the more we can have that out there and available, the more people will be helped through this.
Yeah, thank you. It comes from a really good place. I don't want people to go through what you and I had to without having some just learning to navigate this whole system a little bit better. So it does come from a really heartfelt place. So yeah, thank you for having me on.
Hopefully you heard something today that helps you wherever you might be in life. Do you have questions or a suggestion for a topic you want to know more about? Let me know. Check the show notes for all the contact information. Follow this podcast and find us on social. Know anyone who might find this information helpful? Be a friend and share it. And hey, thank you for hanging out with me today. Keep smiling that beautiful smile. The world needs your sunshine.
It means a lot that you spend this time with us and meet our experts and professionals who can help you through whatever life changes you're facing. Please refer to our terms of service available on our website, lifechangesmag.com. The link is in the show notes. Our disclaimer: Divorce Magazine Canada, Life Changes Magazine and channel, and divorce resource groups are intended to educate and provide quality, credible resource information. The contents should not be used as factual until consultation with the appropriate professionals for any guidance. Divorce Magazine Canada, Life Changes Magazine, and Life Changes channel, as well as the divorce resource groups, do not constitute endorsements for nor liability for any claims made in the presenting of this information.